Showing you for reality the horrible treatment that our animals in this country are going through, and the laws that are set up to protect those animals that are doing nothing. And we can only hope that when President-elect Obama comes in, he has got a bigger heart than the present administration, and will really crack down on what's happening in these slaughter plants. We have with us today, our guest speaker is Vice President of PETA, and he's Bruce Frederick. We want to thank you so much, Bruce, for coming on the show today and talking to our listeners.
Oh, well, it's absolutely my pleasure, Annie. Thank you for the invitation.
PETA has just done an enormous amount to educate. They get a lot of criticism, they get a lot of praise, and I say that, you know, if you get criticism, that's a very good sign you're doing something good, you know?
I think that's true. And, you know, there was a documentary done about PETA's president by HBO. It's called I Am an Animal. Maybe some of your viewers have also seen that. But Bill Maher is asked about precisely that question and whether PETA crosses the line. And he says something along the lines of, I think it's a much greater sin to not get anywhere near the line than to occasionally cross over it. What's really a problem, considering how much bad stuff is happening in society, is people who don't even know where the line is or approach it. So we certainly we would rather go too far than not go far enough.
I don't think you go too far at all. I think that we can never really go far enough in trying to help these animals have a better life and a better death. I mean, we owe them that spiritually, mentally, or we are what I call demented beings. And I really think that the name humane beings, human beings, came from the word humane. I like to think of it that way, that we're humane beings, and that we would, for 1 minute, allow the treatment of these animals means that we have denigrated to a sort of what I call a demon-like being. And that's how I see it, because these animals are being treated, if you were to look in satanic ritual, the satanic ritual could be no worse than how the government allows these animals to be treated. And so to me, it's, you know, when I saw it, I had to become a vegetarian. And a vegan. I'm an aspiring vegan. I'm not a vegetarian yet. I don't eat any meat at all, but I still do dabble in, you know, cheese once in a while, and that's where my demon comes in, you know, and it just takes over. It's the weirdest thing. It's almost like an obsession. It just goes, I don't care what has to suffer, I'm going to eat this cheese, you know, and I do battle with myself, especially at a Foster Fees or something like that on a hot day. And I have to literally visualize the footage and go, okay, you want to give your money to that industry? So you go ahead and you go up there, but just know what you're doing. And, you know, afterwards I feel, oh, so horrible, you know, like I know what I've done. And so I'm getting better. But folks, that's what a lot of us have to do with ourselves. We have to, it's a discipline process of, you know, getting the lower selves to finally be disciplined enough that they get away from this horrible, horrible food habit that we've been brought up on, and that is torturing our animals on every level.
Yeah, I mean, Percy Bysshe Shelley, Mary Shelley's husband, she wrote Frankenstein, of course, and he was a very famous poet in his own right. And in explaining his vegetarianism, he said, I want no part of anything that I can't write a pleasant poem about, which I like as a concept. I mean, I think framing it a little bit differently, but playing on much the same idea, it seems to me that we shouldn't support things that we wouldn't want to do personally. So, for example, all of us could take part in every aspect of getting vegan foods to the table with no moral qualms at all, but none of us would want to work on a factory farm. None of us would want to spend 15 minutes slitting animals' throats open. You know, the vast majority of people don't even want to think about it. They certainly don't want to see it, and even more so, they don't want to participate in it. So I think it's worth asking, where the basic integrity is in paying other people to do things to animals that we don't even want to watch, let alone do ourselves. There's a consistency principle that is worth applying. Similarly, most people would balk at the idea of eating a dog or a cat or consuming the mammary secretions, the milk of a dog or a cat. But there's not any moral difference between eating a dog or a cat, a chicken or a pig. And I think those are some issues that it's useful for aspiring vegetarians or non-vegetarians to give a little bit of thought to.
Absolutely. And every bite at a time, I mean, every person that just decides to give up a burger a week, do you have any statistics on that, how many animals they would be saving a year?
Well, I mean, it takes a little while to eat an entire cow, but the average American in a year eats about 35 chickens, one and a half turkeys, about 40 thin fish, a third of a pig, and a tenth of a cow. So you add it all together, and you're downing almost 100 animals in a year, the average American. Those of us who are a little bit bigger, like me, if we're a meat eater, are probably going to eat more like 130 or 140 animals. A lot of women who are a little bit smaller, it's slightly fewer. But no matter how you look at it, you go from meat eater to vegetarian, you're certainly saving scores of animals from what you have to agree, if you've seen the videos and looked at the documentation, it's unmitigated misery. Alice Walker calls eating chickens, especially, she calls it eating misery, because every moment of these animals' lives is just that, it's misery. Chickens today grow almost 7 times as quickly as they did just 40 years ago as a result of genetic manipulation and massive doses of growth-promoting antibiotics. But their legs and their hearts and their lungs have not been bred to keep up. So the animals can barely move by the time they're shipped to slaughter, and 1% per week die from lung failure or heart collapse or their legs cripple under their massive bulk, and they can't reach the watering troughs. Now imagine the agony of all of the animals in a population where 1% per week are dying from the horrific conditions. Alice Walker is right. Eating chickens really is eating misery.
It is, absolutely. And there's 40,000 science papers on the ill health effects of genetically altered foods, crops and animals, and that was presented to the FDA in 1991. And because the administrator of the FDA at that time and the public relations person at that time was Mike Taylor, who was the former vice president of Monsanto, said, no, there does not need to be any studies, and we don't need to look at those papers. The FDA scientists weren't allowed to look into the question of labeling in this country. It's horrendous how the agrochemical industries have taken over our government and are promoting these unhealthy foods and turning us into something less than we could be if we ate organically and spiritually and poetically, in all those ways. They're just turning us into, I don't know how to describe it, but it is not a pretty picture.
No, it's not a pretty picture, and for those of us who believe in compassion for animals, it's an especially ugly picture. And thus far, the meat and poultry industries have written their own ticket, and they've been doing that for a very long time. There is some indication that Barack Obama may be different. Tom Vilsack certainly was not on the meat industry's top 10 for Secretary of Agriculture. Remains to be seen whether challenging agriculture is something that he's going to take on, but certainly Barack Obama has on multiple occasions addressed the issue
Absolutely. I think if everyone goes to change.gov, that's Obama's site, for suggestions, and type in that one of the most important issues for you, both as in terms of, our restraining the cruelty, stopping the cruelty of these animals, is to make sure that the Humane Slaughter Act is upheld in every sense of the word, and that video cameras are in these plants, so that that goes on the internet. So at any point that there's any indiscrepancy, that that plant is immediately stopped, is very, very important. And also to say, for the health of yourself and for the planet, environmentally, that all ties in. And we're not going to be able to save this planet from global warming if we keep eating meat. Do you know any statistics on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the United Nations compiled a more than 400-page report on all of the environmental impacts of funneling crops through animals rather than eating those crops directly. It's called Livestock's Long Shadow, and they documented that whatever environmental issue you're looking at, from the smallest and most local to the largest and most global, everything from desertification to water use and pollution to land use and soil erosion to global warming, that meat eating is one of the top 3 causes, every single issue. And on the issue of global warming, meat eating is the #1 cause. And in fact, raising animals for food, funneling crops through animals rather than eating those crops directly, causes about 10 times as much global warming as all air travel, including for the military. And it causes 40% more global warming than all transport combined. So you look at all of the trucks used for all purposes, including all of those gas-guzzling 18-wheelers on the road. You look at all of the cars, including the Hummers and the SUVs and all of the cars used across the world. You look at all of the air travel, you add it all up, and eating meat causes 40% more global warming than all of that. It's the #1 human cause. So, I mean, for people who care about this issue, just care about the environment, even if they're not concerned about animal welfare or animal rights from an environmental standpoint, it really has become the case that you can't be a meat-eating environmentalist.
Well, so today we're going to be talking about kosher meat, and we're going to be showing some footage, because a lot of people ask me, well, isn't kosher all right? And I guess it's not, folks, because this is some footage that PETA has gotten. Can you explain a little bit about it as we watch it?
Yeah, back in 2001, I think it was, we got a whistleblower complaint about this slaughterhouse in Iowa called Agri-Processors. It's the largest kosher slaughterhouse in the world, and we wrote to the plant owner and received a very intense letter back from their attorney in Washington, D.C., basically saying, nothing wrong here, mind your own business. So we sent somebody undercover into the place and documented, I guess it would have been 2004 when we finally sent somebody in undercover, right, in our original letter exchange in 2003. And we had somebody working there for about 10 weeks and documented what was really the worst abuse of cattle we've ever seen. Temple Grandin designed most of the cattle slaughterhouses in the United States and has been in more than 20 kosher slaughterhouses. Said this was the worst abuse of animals she's ever seen in her life. It was the most disgusting thing she's ever seen. Also quoting her. So we tried to get it stopped, and we tried to get the kosher certification authorities to take animal welfare seriously. Sadly, the Orthodox Union, which is the largest kosher certifier in the world, said that the kosher status of the meat coming out of agri-processors was never in question. And people can learn all about this, and they can also see a video that we put together that's narrated by Jonathan Safran Foer, the novelist, called It's at humanekosher.com online.
This atrocity of this poor bull with his trachea pulled out and suffering, and there's this indifference. Isn't there a rabbi supposed to pray over these animals and make sure that they're humanely treated? I mean, I can't believe that this monstrousness can happen in this country. And anyone...
It is a sort of, you got to see it to believe it, level of abuse. As you just described, the animals are turned upside down, their throats are split open, their tracheas are ripped out, and then they're dumped out of this crank device onto the ground. Fully 10% of the animals are still fully conscious at this point, which is about 45 seconds to a minute after their throats have been split open, and more than 30 seconds after their tracheas have been ripped out of their throat. I mean, have been ripped out, and some of them are struggling to stand at this point still, and many were alive for more than 2 minutes after their throats were split open. And yeah, there's a rabbi who's saying a prayer and slicing the animal's throat open, and nevertheless, there's this level of abuse that uniform and unanimous condemnation from every animal welfare expert who was consulted by RITA or by the media. There was no attempt to defend the abuse on the part of the Orthodox Union or agri-processors itself, and nevertheless, the Orthodox Union says that the kosher status of the meat coming out of this place was never in question. What does that say about kosher standards? Very bad thing.
Well, it's...
Jonathan Safran IV and narrating this video says Jews who believe in the kosher mandate of compassion should be vegetarian.
It is beyond cruelty. It is inexcusable, and anyone, I'm part Jewish. And shame on the Jewish people, because their law by God was thou shalt not kill. And wherever they decided to reinterpret that as thou shalt not kill human beings and allow this kind of hideousness on any level, shame on you, Jewish people. You need to look at this. You need to stop it. I can't believe you're allowing this to happen. And I'm looking at the footage now. These poor animals put in this huge tank. How would you like to be put into this? You talk about what happened in World War II, and you're allowing this to happen to God's animals now, and you're being high and holy. I mean, I can't believe it. I really believe if there is a God, this cruelty will be... I can't even speak right now. This is so horrible what's going on. And
I think it's important to remember that on the forefront of condemnation of this are Orthodox, Reform, conservative, and ultra-Orthodox rabbis and Jewish people. So it's really, it's the Kosher Certification Agency that's at such fault, but we have found in the Jewish community significantly more support and moral outrage over what we found at agri-processors than we tend to find in investigations. So the idea that this would in some way infuse Judaism or Jewish people, it really shouldn't. The response could have been better, and the response from the Orthodox Union has been kind of sad and disappointing, but the overall response on Jewish blogs from Jewish leaders, the entire conservative movement of Judaism declared a boycott of agri-processors in response to our investigation, and that's the largest segment of Judaism. So it's a moral outrage, and it's hideous, but it's the exception rather than the rule. Unfortunately, it's the people with the power in this area who are defending it.
these beautiful animals that all they do is eat grass are so much more kind and benevolent and sweet than human beings can be on any level. And here they are locked in this horrible, horrible chamber, panic-stricken. I mean, you know, and then left to this agony, and there's no one there to help them. They're dying all alone, and you people out there, you need to get active. You need to do something. Don't eat kosher, and don't eat meat. Just see what's going on here. If you think our government is going to do something about it, you're wrong. They're not going to do a dang thing about it. They are so entangled with the meat industry, they're not going to do anything about it. And what is being done? Is this been stopped or is this still going on?
Well, agri-processors shut down because in addition to the abuse that they were meting out against animals, they were also using child labor and massive illegal immigration. The guy who runs agri-processors, Shalom Rubushkin, is in jail for, I can't remember what the precise charges are, but it's a whole bunch of counts having to do with conspiracy and exploitation of child and immigrant labor. All of that came as a result of our investigation, actually. Once we wrote this investigation, The Forward, which is the largest weekly Jewish magazine in the country, started taking agri-processors' investigation very, very seriously. Agri-processors tried to fight with The Forward and accused them basically of being a self-hating Jewish publication, which The Forward, to its credit, did not take lying down. And
so, yeah, it's beyond anything that you could even imagine going on in this country. And I am so ashamed to be American and part Jewish that, you know, for all the lessons that we learned in World War II, that we as Jewish people would inflict that on the animals so casually. And to me, it's casual if this is still going on. If Jewish people are still eating meat, under the law of God, it says, thou shalt not kill. And it does not say, thou shalt not kill human beings. It says, thou shalt not kill, because that's what God wanted us to know, is that we were to sacrifice our appetites, our bloodlust, for God, and give up the bloodlust for God, and not torture these animals. And in India, they revere animals, and except for the leather part, which is another whole story. But this is so horrible. Anyway, what progress is going on? And so this agro-processors no longer is doing its thing, huh?
Well, no. Agro-processors has shut down. Our investigation class is very diligent and investigative journalists in the Jewish community for the Jewish media, especially a weekly called The Forward, to start delving into precisely what was going on there. Agri-processors accused them of all sorts of untoward stuff, which caused them to dig in further, and they discovered all kinds of duplicity on the part of the corporation, violation of environmental laws and immigration laws and child labor laws, and now the president of agri-processors is in jail.
Oh, I wish yeah.
The company has been closed down.
But is this violations going on in other plants? I mean, do you know? I'm sure, because by kosher law, they can't process their animals the same way that others can, right? Isn't there something they have to do?
The animals have to be conscious when their throats are slit open, which seems like basically a bad idea.
Oh.
And Judaism is so decentralized that it's really up to rabbis in the various regions to determine precisely what that means. In Australia, the slice happens and then the animals are immediately knocked unconscious with a captive bull, which is something that we like to see the rest of the Jewish community globally allowed to happen. Thus far, that hasn't happened in the United States. Mm-hmm. And the thing that people who are, a lot of people are putting pressure on the Orthodox Union to require some animal welfare standards. That would make a lot of sense. The fact that the Orthodox Union continued to defend the hideous abuse that we documented as acceptably kosher should really cause anybody who eats any kosher meat at all to reconsider. And that's the point of the video at humanekosher.com, narrated by Jonathan Safran 4. It's called If This Is Kosher. And the continuation of that is, then we should all be vegetarians. And he makes a very eloquent case for Jewish vegetarianism on that basis.
I'm going to stop for a minute, because Physicians Committee for Social Responsibility is another great organization, and they are proving that by going vegan, you are by far healthier and less neurotic and all the wonderful things that go along with veganism. And
I think you're thinking of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine.
that's right.
Physicians Committee for Social Responsibility.
Exactly.
A great organization, but different.
Absolutely different, exactly. But they're still pushing for the same thing, but on a, as far as medical health goes, and proving that being a vegan is much more healthy than consuming meat. And I think that's very important because a lot of people are not willing to give up meat because they really think that they will dummy down and they won't be strong. You probably have some statistics. I know that Nikolai Tulsa was a vegetarian, so was Einstein. I know that the string theorist, what is his name? Dr. Brown, University of Columbia, he's a vegan. Do you know about him?
I don't. I think you hit on some very powerful thinkers. If we had people like Albert Einstein and Leo Tolstoy and Mahatma Gandhi on our side, we're in pretty good intellectual stead. Richard Dawkins, who's the foremost Darwin scholar alive today, I'm not sure if he's a vegetarian, but he argues very eloquently against speciesism. His sort of the collected Richard Dawkins, according to Richard Dawkins, is called the Devil's Chaplain, and in a couple of the essays, he talks about the fact that other species are made of flesh and blood and bone, just like we are. They have the same 5 physiological senses that we do, and they feel pain in the same way and to the same degree that we do. So eating meat means quite literally eating a corpse. There are these cases, very famous cases, of people eating one another, whether it's the rugby team in the Alive movie, which of course actually happened, or the serial killer in British Columbia, Robert Picton, who was also a pig farmer, and he served some of his 49 victims to people who thought they were getting pig meat. And people were outraged, and you can understand their outrage, but something we like to point out is that people couldn't tell the difference, because a corpse is a corpse is a corpse. If you're eating meat, that's what you're eating. You're eating an animal's flesh and blood.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this segment, and keep up the good work, Bruce, what you and what PETA is doing. And
well, you too, Annie. Thank you so much for the invitation to be on the show.
All right. Thank you. Well, listeners, so that's our news on this particular program. I want to thank you, all of you that could stand to watch this footage. Please don't eat kosher, and don't eat meat, and really educate yourselves. Get off this meat, dairy, the whole thing. It's the only way we're going to make this a beautiful planet. And that's all I can say for now. I'm Annie Griffin, your host, and we air every Tuesdays at 10:30 p.m. Mark it down in your calendar and tell others. Good night.